Jerusalem, year 33 AD, a city of 80,000 people, hosting more than 200,000 that week. Pilgrims from Galilee, from Egypt, from Rome, all converging on the same place for the same celebration. And in the middle of that crowd, there was a man walking as if he already knew how the story would end, because he did. What no one understood yet was that this was not just another Passover. This was the Passover, the moment every lamb had been pointing to for over 1,000 years. But before you understand what happened that night, you need to understand something about time in the first century Jewish world. The day didn't begin in the morning. It began at sunset, when the light faded and something new was born in the dark. That means the Last Supper didn't happen at the end of Thursday. It happened at the beginning of it. And that's not a small detail. It's the key to understanding why every action that night fulfilled, with surgical precision, every requirement of Exodus 12. God was not improvising. He was fulfilling. Jesus gathered the 12 in an upper room in a house in the higher part of Jerusalem. They reclined around a low, U-shaped table in the Roman style known as a triclinium. They weren't sitting in chairs like in medieval paintings. They were reclining like free men, because that was part of the Passover symbolism. To eat as those who are no longer slaves. But beneath the surface, there was tension. The disciples had spent the day arguing about who among them was the greatest. And among them was one who had already made his decision. 30 pieces of silver, weighing far more on the conscience than in the hand. And there was Jesus, who, according to John, knew everything that was about to happen to him. And still, he sat with them, looked each of them in the eyes, and began. Then something happens that only John records. Before the meal, before the bread and the wine, before a single word is spoken, Jesus stands up. He removes his outer garment, takes a towel, and kneels down. John introduces the moment like this. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was returning to God, rose from supper. This is not the act of someone who doesn't know who he is. This is the act of someone who knows exactly who he is. And precisely because of that, he kneels. In the first century world, washing feet was the task of the lowest servant in the house. So low that even Jewish disciples were not expected to wash their teacher's feet. And here was the Son of God doing exactly that. Power, bending down. Glory, wrapped in a towel. When he came to Peter, it was too much. "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" And Jesus answered, "What I am doing now you do not understand, but later you will." Then he said something that explained everything. "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." That act was more than service. It was a preview. The water of that night pointed to the blood of the next day. And when he finished, he sat down again and made it clear. "If I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet." That night, the church didn't just receive a symbol, it received a model. Power expressed as service. Authority clothed in humility. Greatness measured by self-emptying. The meal followed the structure of the Passover Seder, 4 cups of wine, each tied to the promises of Exodus 6. "I will bring you out. I will deliver you. I will redeem you. I will take you as my people." And in the middle of that ancient, sacred rhythm, Jesus took the unleavened bread and said something no one had ever said before. "This is my body given for you." Then he took the cup. "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, poured out for you." With those words, he redefined the entire Exodus story around himself. He was the lamb, the one every other lamb had been pointing to, and his blood would establish a new covenant. Not written on stone, but written on the human heart. Then came the most disturbing moment of the night. Jesus was troubled in spirit and said, "One of you will betray me." John, leaning close to him, whispered, "Lord, who is it?" The answer came in the form of a gesture, an ancient act of honor. "The one to whom I give this piece of bread." Offering that bread was a sign of affection. Even at that moment, Jesus was extending grace to Judas, Judas took the bread and left, and it was night. John is not describing the weather. In his writing, night is the realm of those who walk away from the light. Judas stepped out, not just into darkness, but into the darkness he had chosen. And what's even more unsettling, the others didn't understand. They thought Jesus had sent him to buy something or give money to the poor. The betrayal happened in plain sight and looked like something ordinary. That's how close darkness can be to what we trust. After Judas left, Jesus prayed. And then came the moment that changes everything. I do not pray for these alone, but also for those who will believe in me through their word. Pause. In that room, that night, Jesus was praying for you, not as an idea, but as the person you are, in the time you live, with the faith you carry. You were already in that prayer before you were born. After the Psalms were sung, they left. They walked toward the Mount of Olives, to a place called Gethsemane, a name that means oil press, pressure, weight, crushing. Jesus took Peter, James, and John and said, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." Luke, the physician, records something remarkable. His sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground, a condition known as hematidrosis, when extreme stress causes blood vessels to rupture into the sweat glands. This wasn't fear of physical death. Others had faced death with calm resolve. What weighed on him was something far greater. The weight of sin, the separation it brings, the cup he would drink, so we would never have to. And from the ground of that garden, he prayed, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." This is the reverse of Eden. In Eden, man said no to God to follow his own will. In Gethsemane, the son said yes to God, even when it cost everything. Then Judas arrived, with soldiers, torches, weapons, and a kiss. Jesus answered with words no translation fully captures. "Friend, why have you come?" At the moment of betrayal, he called him friend. Peter drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear. Jesus stopped him, touched the man, and healed him. The last miracle before the crucifixion was restoring the damage caused by one of his own followers to the man who came to arrest him. That's how consistent the gospel is. The disciples fled. Jesus stood alone. Heaven seemed silent, but it wasn't. Every detail of that night fulfilled what had been written centuries before: the friend who would betray him, the 30 pieces of silver, the suffering servant. Nothing was accidental. That night didn't spiral out of control. It reached its appointed purpose. When you pray in your darkest moments, you are in Gethsemane, with the one who also prayed in the dark. When you feel betrayed, you are not alone. He called his betrayer friend. When the bread is broken, you are back in that upper room. This is not just a moment remembered once a year. It is the foundation of every day of your faith. And if this message reached you, consider subscribing to the channel. Because that night, in that room, before you ever existed, you were already part of that prayer.